Hello, this is Melanie Guralnik, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the February 17th issue of the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first story is Kid Rock and Health Secretary team up in bizarre campaign video by Ian Shantz. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Kid Rock want to make America healthy again. And Donald Trump's health secretary and the Detroit rap rocker are going shirtless in the name of their apparent campaign. In a video clip posted to Kennedy's X account on Tuesday afternoon, the politician and rocker are shown working out, sharing meals, and taking cold plunges inside some sort of lodge. The promo video is introduced as, quote, Secretary Kennedy and Kid Rock's Rock Out Workout, and features Kid Rock's 1999 mega hit Bawitdaba, blaring as the two appear shirtless. Together, they do some leg curls and sit-ups. They appear shirtless again, this time working out together inside a sauna. Kennedy is in jeans. Kid Rock, meanwhile, gives an obligatory middle finger to the camera while decked out only in workout shorts. Cold plunge in jeans? Next up, Kennedy is seen jumping in for an ice bath or a cold plunge. He's not wearing a shirt, but for some reason he enters the water wearing blue jeans before completely submerging himself under the water. Where's Kid? Kennedy later asks before the camera finds the rocker hanging out and flexing his muscles in what appears to be a hot tub. They later take part in a pickleball match. After that, Kennedy, who is still wearing his trusted jeans, jumps into the hot tub. After that, the two are seen drinking glasses of whole milk together in the hot tub. Because, well, why not? The video clip ends with the words, "Make America Healthy Again." I've teamed up with @KidRock to deliver two simple messages to the American people. All in caps. Get active plus eat real food. A message reads on Kennedy's X account. Tour cancellations. The clip arrives as Kid Rock's Rock the Country tour has struggled with cancellations after several artists bailed on what local officials described as a, quote, politically charged event. The Detroit native was tapped by right-wing nonprofit Turning Point USA to headline the rival All-American halftime show after the NFL hired Latin music superstar Bad Bunny as its headliner for recent Super Bowl. During an appearance on Fox News' The Ingraham Angle, the conservative darling, whose MAGA alternative was viewed by more than 5 million people live on YouTube, gave his review of Bad Bunny's 13-minute performance. Quote, like most people, I didn't understand any of it, Rock, 51, said of the show via the rap, which Bad Bunny sang entirely in Spanish. Quote, I saw there's a lot of dancers and a lot of big to-do stuff. And, he said he wanted to have a dance party. It looked like he had one. There's a picture of that Instagram post where you can see the two guys in the sauna. RFK is in his jeans. They're dark jeans. And he's got his hands on his hips and he's flexing all of his muscles possible. He's got gray hair that's slightly receding, and he's got kind of a smirk or a smile, a cross between the two. And he's got Kid Rock in front of him doing the same, hands on hips. He's got a towel draped over one shoulder, and he's in black shorts. Photo courtesy of Secretary Kennedy via Instagram. That story was Kid Rock and Health Secretary team up in bizarre campaign video by Ian Shantz. The next story is Doug Ford defends OSAP changes, says student aid system not sustainable by Jordan Ursit. Premier Doug Ford said Ontario's decision to change a student financial aid system he deemed not sustainable financially was the right one, despite hearing from concerned citizens over the weekend. The province announced last week that it will be boosting funding to colleges and universities to the tune of $6.4 billion over 4 years after cutting tuition by 10% in 2019 and freezing the rates there for the next 7 years. Since then, Ford told the Canadian press that his progressive conservative government has faced, quote, massive pressure from post-secondary officials to reverse that decision. I want to remind a lot of the students that I fought for them for 7.5 years, not letting universities and colleges raise tuition, Ford said, via the Canadian press. More loans, fewer grants for OSAP recipients. Schools will also be able to raise tuition rates by up to 2% over the next 3 years, after which the rate will be capped at whatever is lower, 2% or the average rate of inflation. The province, however, also made changes to the Ontario Student Assistance Program to accompany the extra funding to schools. The aid system will now lean more toward loans over unreturned grants given to post-secondary students based on need. When he announced the decision on February 12th, Colleges and Universities Minister Nolan Quinn said grant funding will be changed to a maximum of 25% of the amount students received from OSAP. That's down from the 85% grant, 15% low ratio that students currently receive. Students will still have until 6 months after they graduate to start repaying the loans, which are interest-free up to that point. I'm always saying we have the brightest and best students and best colleges and universities in the world. But when you're in the hole $2.5 billion, it wasn't realistic, Ford said, via the Canadian press. Student unions planning rally? The moves, which could add another $7 billion in funding through increased tuition, have been applauded by the Council of Ontario Universities and Colleges Ontario, as post-secondary institutions grapple with program and staffing cuts, due in part to a decrease in international student permits. Student unions, however, have sharply criticized the decision, with some planning a rally at Queen's Park. They said members are already grappling with a cost of living crisis that is affecting how much they pay for food, housing, transit, and other expenses. When all of these things are combined, it is absolutely going to be more difficult for students to cover these loans once they graduate. University of Windsor Students' Alliance President Hussam Mora told the Canadian press in an article published on Monday. Other student unions have said that the changes will put post-secondary education further out of reach to students from low or middle-income families. There is a picture of Ontario Premier Doug Ford taken last September. It's just basically a head and shoulders picture. He's wearing a black suit with a purple tie, and he's looking up and to the right with his hand up in the air. He must be speaking at an event, and the sky is just plain blue behind him. Photo courtesy of Chris Young from the Canadian press. That story was Doug Ford defends OSAP changes, says student aid system not sustainable, by Jordan Ursit. The next story is Joshua practices McMahon ponders future as Maple Leafs return to ice, by Terry Caution. They're back! That would be the Maple Leafs, not seen in Toronto since January 27th, when they lost 7-4 against the Buffalo Sabres to end a pitiful 5-game homestand at Scotiabank Arena with a record of 0-4-1. Hope I said that right. The Leafs managed to gain some momentum in the 4-game trip that followed, winning 3 games in a row in Western Canada to move to within 6 points of the second wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. Despite the harsh odds, the Leafs also have Columbus, Washington, and Ottawa between them and the final playoff spot. The Leafs generally were upbeat as they returned to practice on Tuesday afternoon at the Ford Performance Center. Their Olympic break now over, other than Captain Auston Matthews, William Nylander, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, of course, the Leafs have a week to prepare for the final 25-game stretch that begins next Wednesday in Tampa Bay against the Lightning. What's the status of the injured players? Perhaps no player was happier to be back on the ice than forward Dakota Joshua, who has not played since December 28, when he suffered a lacerated kidney in Detroit against the Red Wings. I've been out for a while as is, so I'm more excited for it to be over and just get back out there, Joshua said. A little rusty, not the best, still a ways to go, but nice to be out there with the guys. We'll see how this week goes and where we're at next week. It was a long time off, so I still have a little bit to get my legs under me. Joshua missed the Leafs' last 19 games before the break. A healthy, robust Joshua certainly would help the Leafs once games resume, and the club tries to claw its way back into playoff contention. Defenseman Chris Tanev, meanwhile, skated on his own in full gear before practice, and will continue to do so in the coming days, Coach Craig Berube said. Whether Tanev, who has played in just 11 games in 2025 through 26, eventually returns from a groin injury has not been determined. He's going to see where he's at, Berube said. Defenseman Morgan Rielly was a full participant after missing the final 2 games prior to the break with an upper body injury, while forward Matthew Knies benefited from giving his ailing knee injury a rest at his off-season home in Arizona. "I feel great," Knies said. "I spent a lot of time on it. It was a pretty valuable 2 weeks for me. I'm in a good spot." How is Bobby McMann handling his uncertain future? If Leafs general manager Brad Treliving makes good on the speculation that he will go into sell mode, McMann will be squarely in the sights of several contenders as the National Hockey League trade deadline on March 6 looms. "Honestly, it's not bad," McMann said of pushing aside the trade chatter. "People talk about it, but I recognize that I have zero control over that. You control what you can control, and that's pouring everything I can into my game to contribute here. That's all I'm trying to do right now." McMann has repeatedly said he would like to remain in Toronto. That he will be an unrestricted free agent this summer and has no trade protection in his contract are a couple of factors working against that desire. Of the players eligible to be a UFA this summer, only 5 presently have more than McMann's 19 goals. And one of them, Capitals captain Alex Ovechkin, is nowhere near the trade market. McMann started his break in a unique manner. Once the Leafs beat the Oilers 5-2 in Edmonton on February 3rd, McMann hopped in the car with his parents to spend a few days at their home in nearby Sherwood Park. "First time I went home after a game to my parents' place with them in probably 15 years, McMann said with a smile. "Walking through the parking lot with them and carrying my gear was hilarious, but it was good. It was a nice little reset." What's the Leafs' overall outlook? No one needs to tell the Leafs about the uphill battle they face. During the Leafs game in Calgary against the Flames on February 2, TSN showed a graphic of the NHL teams to make the playoffs, when they were at least 8 points out of a playoff spot on February 1. Since 1994, only 3 teams in that spot on that date, the New York Islanders in 94, 10 points out, the St. Louis Blues in 2009, 9 points out, and the Ottawa Senators in 2015, 11 points out. have rallied to earn a berth in the Stanley Cup tournament. The Leafs have closed that gap to 6 points, but aren't kidding themselves about what lies ahead. Of their remaining games, 10 are at home and 15 are on the road. The numbers and probabilities aren't exceptional for us, but we have an opportunity to try to win games, and that's the focus, McMahon said. The mindset is taking each day to try to be better than we were before the break, using it to our advantage. John Tavares spent part of the break in the Bahamas with his family and was able to relax. I love the game, and the itch is kind of always there. But certainly, as you get older, you appreciate things more, Tavares said. Regardless of how things are going, you understand the importance of many other things in life. It was a significant break that forces you to disconnect. It was a good chance to get away. Now we start building towards an important stretch of hockey until the end of the year, understanding where we stand and wanting to get off on the right foot. There's a picture of Dakota Joshua, who is number 81 of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's celebrating his goal alongside Nicholas Roy, who's number 55, against the Florida Panthers. This was taken on December 2, 2025, and they're on the hockey rink ice, and Dakota is holding his hockey stick and looking over toward Nicholas Roy. Nicholas Roy is he's reacting big time. So he's got his mouth open so huge, like he's screaming, and his arms are in like fists as he's holding his hockey stick. He looks super charged up. Photo courtesy of Carmen Mondato via Getty Images. That story was Joshua Practices, McMahon Ponders Future as Maple Leafs Return to Ice by Terry Caution. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Warmington. Is Durham Region's hate reporting program just fancy snitch line? By Joe Warmington. Durham Region has created its own hate police department. While those on patrol won't be carrying a badge or a gun, have the power to arrest or charge anyone, or have any connection to Durham Regional Police, they seem to be planning to collect, document, and store information about residents in the region in their quest to help victims of discrimination or bigotry. In what is believed to be a first for Canada, Durham Region has set up its own hate enforcement unit that is separate from the police department, called the Community-Based Hate Reporting Program. With it, citizens will be able to tell on each other when they feel there is hate involved in a situation. And the system will employ tools to help people who have been victimized. The program offers a secure and confidential online tool where residents can report incidents of hate, even when it doesn't meet the threshold of a crime. It provides an alternative for those who are unwilling or unable to report directly to the police, and there is an option to remain anonymous, the webpage said. Funding and cost unclear. It also said that by working closely with VSDR, which is Victim Services of Durham Region, whose expertise, strong foundation, and highly trained staff have helped make this program possible, we're making reporting easier and ensuring meaningful support for those impacted by hate. It appears the funding is coming through the region's taxpayers and the provincial government. As of Tuesday evening, neither Durham Region nor its chair John Henry have revealed what the budget for the program is or how many people will be staffing it. But a spokesperson said they are working on the Toronto Sun's questions. This is going to be interesting, groundbreaking, and perhaps landscape-changing too. Don't look now, but Durham Region may just have its own unofficial collaborator unit which informed the Ministry for State Security in communist-run East Germany. Sometimes calling the authorities on fellow citizens is the appropriate thing to do. But it gets murkier when the government asks people not to call the police, but to call them instead. Nothing but a snitch line? Of course, Durham Region was already concerned that people may have questions and posted some answers on its webpage. Isn't the community-based hate reporting tool just a snitch line? The headline on their webpage says. Their answer, quote, "The community-based hate reporting online reporting tool is not a snitch line, but an online platform designed to empower individuals to report hate incidents and provide an alternative for those who are unwilling or unable to report directly to the police. Submissions are handled confidentially by Victim Services of Durham Region, who can provide post-incident, trauma-informed support. The aim is to support individuals who have experienced or witnessed hate and improve community response." Why not just call the police if you see or experience hate? Their explanation, quote, "Its purpose is to assist individuals who have experienced hateful incidents by providing trauma-informed care and improve community response. Police involvement only occurs if the person reporting through this program chooses to involve law enforcement." The website also says the, quote, "concept of hate can feel different for everyone. What one person experiences as hateful may not feel the same to another. However, when it comes to legal standards, Canada uses specific definitions under the Criminal Code. A hate incident is any act motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate toward an identifiable group, such as race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, marital status, family status, or disability," the explanation says. It may include words, actions, or behaviors that cause harm, but do not always meet the threshold for a criminal offense. What are the limits of its reach? But could this new program end up getting involved in somebody telling a joke at a comedy show or at a backyard barbecue? Or step in when a rock band is stretching the line? Or even somebody posting something online that others seem offensive? Could there be a Charter of Rights and Freedoms concerns with this new program? Or could asking this kind of thing be deemed hateful and prompt an anonymous complaint for an investigation? Quote, "Combating hate requires all of us, every single one of us," Allison Hector Alexander, the director of the region's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Division, said in a news release, adding, quote, "Partnership demonstrates what can be achieved when government, human rights groups, faith organizations, and local service providers work hand in hand." However, with the program feeling like a potential overreach and working as its own quasi-law enforcement group outside the rules police have to follow and courts test, the public might want to keep an eye on it to see who decides what is discriminatory, what they do with their data, which calls they deem hateful, and if anybody gets to oversee and even police them. That story was Warmington. Is Durham Region's hate reporting program just fancy snitch line? By Joe Warmington. The next story is Federal Bureaucracy Costs Skyrocket 80% in 10 Years. Report by Brian Toey. Prime Minister Mark Carney is facing calls to immediately shrink the federal bureaucracy after Tuesday's report released by the Parliamentary Budget Officer shows costs continue to increase at an alarming rate. The PBO's personnel expenditure analysis says the federal bureaucracy cost taxpayers $71.4 billion in 2024 through 25. In 2015 through 16, that number stood at $39.6 billion, a rise of 80% in 10 years. In 2024 through 25, the federal public service expanded to 448,000 full-time equivalents, an increase of 7,000 FTEs, or 1.6%, compared to the previous year, the budget watchdog said in its report. Total compensation per full-time federal employee reached $143,271 last year, marking a second consecutive year with historically high growth in spending per FTE, the report added. We can't afford this. CTF. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says Canadians can't afford more bureaucrats, and that the report shows just how urgently Carney must start cutting costs. Today's PBO report is more proof that the cost of the federal bureaucracy ballooned, and taxpayers can't afford to keep paying for all these bureaucrats in Ottawa. Franco Terrazzano, CTF Federal Director, said in a news release. Carney needs to take urgent action to significantly cut the size and cost of government bureaucracy now. Canada's ballooning bureaucracy under scrutiny. The federal government has been under pressure to put Canada's morbidly obese public service on a crash diet. Canada's federal public service grew by 40% over 10 years, from 257,034 employees in 2015 to nearly 358,000 in 2025, according to data made public by Statistics Canada. At the same time, Canada's population only grew from 35.6 million in 2015 to 41.6 million in 2025, a 16% increase. Under the tenure of former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Canada's bureaucracy grew by 99,000 positions, while average pay for the federal bureaucrats sat around $125,300. 113% more than Canada's average annual income, which as of 2024 was $58,900. Switch to austerity. After a decade of expansion, the government says it is planning to, quote, right-size federal bureaucracy through a comprehensive expenditure review, CER, according to the budget tabled by Carney last November. It seeks to find $13 billion in annual savings by 2028 through 29, along with a goal to reduce the public service to 330,000 employees. Carney's intention to cut has raised hackles at the Canadian Union of Public Employees, saying it reflects Stephen Harper-era politics. Not even Stephen Harper could dream of cuts this deep, said CUPE National President Mark Hancock last year. Whether it's dental care, services for Indigenous communities, environmental programs, or public sector jobs, everything is on the chopping block except military spending. Higher costs, worse service. But Canadians don't feel like they're getting much value for their tax dollar. A Ledger poll commissioned by the CTF last year says 50% of Canadians think services have gotten worse in the last 10 years, and 54% want the government to reduce its size and cost. More government bureaucrats taking more money from taxpayers hasn't resulted in better services for Canadians, Terrazzano said. Canadians can't afford to pay higher taxes to fund Ottawa's bloated and underperforming bureaucracy. Department Transparency and Issue, PBO. The budget watchdog says it has gotten information about where cuts will happen. Although most federal organizations have asked that details around specific program cuts and potential impacts to service be kept confidential. We've been clear that we don't agree with the confidentiality that departments have insisted upon. Interim Parliamentary Budget Officer Jason Jacks said at a recent Senate Finance Committee meeting, responding to a question from Senator Krista Ross. We've highlighted research that indicates transparency works to everybody's advantage when there are tough restraint measures or cuts that are going through the system. So far, he said, the government has said it's withholding details on the impact of job cuts, arguing it must notify affected workers before making the information public. Jack said the PBO will respect that request for now. From our perspective, as soon as the government tables the main estimates, which is linked to an appropriation bill which has the cuts included in it, at that point, it's under debate by Parliament and under discussion by Parliament. So any erstwhile confidentiality is kind of put by the wayside, he said. The government tables the main estimates on or before March 1. That story was Federal Bureaucracy Costs Skyrocket, 80% in 10 Years. Report by Brian Toey. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Shia LaBeouf busted in New Orleans during Mardi Gras by Brian Toey. Actor Shia LaBeouf traded po' boys for punches, and it got him a one-way ticket to a Big Easy hospital during Mardi Gras. LaBeouf, 39, was arrested by New Orleans police shortly after midnight on Tuesday for battery after allegedly trying to punch a manager at Royal Street Inn and Bar in Faubourg-Marigny, next to the French Quarter, and hitting another patron who was helping the manager. He then allegedly punched another man in the nose before bystanders took him down and held him until police arrived. LaBeouf was taken to hospital, discharged, arrested, and charged with 2 counts of simple battery. He was scheduled to be in New Orleans court later Tuesday as Mardi Gras festivities were ramping up there. A video surfaced early Tuesday of LaBeouf, in which he has no shirt on and is exchanging words with others. It then shows him being attended to by paramedics. He is terrorizing the city. LaBeouf has struggled with alcoholism and has apparently been on a bender in the Crescent City since last Thursday. Various bartenders across the city told The Hollywood Reporter. One who requested anonymity told the website, quote, "He is terrorizing the city." The actor reportedly showed up Sunday night at 24/7 dive bar Ms. Mays at the corner of Magazine Street and Napoleon Avenue in uptown New Orleans without a shirt or cash. He wasn't alone or sober, said bouncer Robert Skeuse. "Do you know who I am?" LaBeouf arrived at the bar at around the same time the Bacchus Super Crew parade rolled up nearby St. Charles Avenue, with thousands of revelers in tow with Go Cups, plastic or paper cups used so New Orleans partygoers can legally consume alcohol on the street, and catching, quote, throws, which are beads or trinkets. Quote, "He did the 'do you know who I am' bit," Skeuse said. Many did recognize him, asking him to pose for group Instagrams, and LaBeouf obliged. Once he attempted to be a, quote, "celebrity bartender," staff asked him to leave. Split from wife. An insider told Page6.com that the actor called it quits with his wife, actress Mia Goth, and moved to New Orleans after the breakup to spend time with family. The two have reportedly been apart for a year, but it's unclear if they've filed for divorce. The pair have been on again, off again since they met on the set of Nymphomaniac Volume 2 in 2012. There is a picture of Shia LaBeouf that was taken, I don't know, it doesn't even say when. He's at some kind of red carpet event. He's got brown hair with a little bit of silver in it. He has like a unshaven face except for a big bushy mustache. He's wearing a black bow tie and a blue jacket. He's kind of looking up with a serious expression, and there are lots of photographers behind him. Photo courtesy of Joel C. Ryan from the Associated Press. I also looked at the video that was taken. Oh my gosh, he is so drunk. He is belligerent. He's got no shirt on. He is on the pavement outside of the bar, and there's 4 or 5 guys just trying to hold him down because he's just wanting to fight or something. And they just keep yelling at him, stay chill, chill out. He looked bad. Okay. That story was Shia LaBeouf busted in New Orleans during Mardi Gras by Brian Toey. The next story is Kinsella. Organization is key to winning information wars. Just ask anti-Israel and MAGA crowds by Warren Kinsella. Exactly 100 days after Hamas attacked Israel in October 2023, I was asked to speak at a rally at Toronto City Hall to call for the release of the Israeli hostages still held by Hamas. I appeared before a crowd of a couple hundred people, tops. My colleague Brian Lilly was there too, covering the event. It was bitterly cold, so Brian and I headed a few blocks east toward Yonge Street to warm up. Almost immediately, we could hear lots of chants and noise. The clamor was coming from a crowd of variously anti-Israel, anti-West, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas protesters heading south on Yonge, paralyzing Toronto's main street. Is it Yonge? There were thousands upon thousands of them. They had taken over the center of Toronto. The police didn't seem to be doing anything. Palestinian flags and anti-Semitic signage as far as the eye could see. In the intervening years, that same thing has been observed over and over again in the streets and on computer and TV screens. The mainly Jewish, pro-Israel side sometimes showing up in puny numbers. And on the other side, 100 times as many people, organized and organizing against Jews and the Jewish state. With seemingly bottomless resources, with tested messages, with military precision. There are exceptions, of course. There is, say, the annual Walk for Israel, which attracts thousands of people to Toronto to march up Bathurst Street. But for the most part, the angry Israel haters have completely dominated the propaganda battle that commenced in earnest on October 7, 2023, when Hamas murdered and wounded thousands of Israeli civilians. It is not even debatable. They are winning the information war. Strategies of left and right impact success. The same phenomenon can be observed in politics, too. In an essay in a recent issue of The New Yorker, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Charles Duhigg investigated the contrasting tactics and strategies of the American left and right. The left has the Democratic Party, Duhigg writes, and occasional events like the 2017 Women's March or the 2025 No Kings protests. The right has Donald Trump, MAGA, Turning Point USA, and the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Even though most voters self-identify as progressive, the right has been utterly dominating the discourse in recent years in the United States. The MAGA side controls the White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the Supreme Court. The left, meanwhile, can put together big and flashy events. The Women's March attracted 5 million participants. The No Kings rallies had 7 million. And then, nothing. After an event takes place, the momentum always fizzles out. Writes Duhigg, The left is great at mobilizing. It can propel people into the streets with big marches, raise billions of dollars for national candidates, and get liberals to bombard congressional offices with letters and phone calls. However, it's less talented at organizing and building the kinds of local infrastructure and disparate leaders that are needed to sustain a large and ideologically diverse coalition. MAGA, on the other hand, is great at organizing. MAGA has done so with what the Republicans call the Faith and Freedom Coalition, inspired precinct strategy, which focuses on building formidable infrastructure on the ground, populated with people with sometimes wildly contrasting views on guns, abortion, healthcare, and so on. For admission, however, all that's required is an affection for Donald Trump. United on prime objective is key. Meanwhile, the anti-Israel, anti-West, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas side have many internal disagreements as well. But, like MAGA, those things are not as important as the prime objective, which is eliminating the Jewish state. Continues Duhigg, quote, "This kind of organizing is hardly the only reason that Trump won. But scholars who study both parties agree that in recent decades Republicans have created broad ideological coalitions, something that Democrats, who tend to have litmus tests on abortion, social justice, and numerous other topics, have not achieved. Conservatives have also built a media ecosystem that dwarfs Democratic messaging. The MAGA movement has nevertheless done a fantastic job of welcoming anyone who puts on the red hat. That's the only requirement. You just have to think Trump is great." The Israel haters are like that too. They don't subject potential recruits to purity tests. All that is required is singular commitment to ending Israel. The pro-Israel side, on the other hand, is too often driven with disagreements about strategy and tactics, and too many contrasting organizations and voices. And the Israel haters have taken full and frequent advantage of that. Periodic protests, slick websites, and celebrity endorsements are nice. They make people feel good. But what matters on election day, or in the battle to capture public opinion, is long-term strength on the ground. Bodies, organization, commitment. All politics is local. Democratic Party legend Tip O'Neill liked to say. But his party has forgotten that lesson, and Trump's MAGA has learned it too well. Same goes for the Israel-Hamas propaganda war. There, the bad guys have been winning because they know organization isn't just one thing. It's everything. Kinsella's new book on the propaganda war against Israel and the West, called The Hidden Hand, is being released by Penguin Random House starting this month. There is a picture of pro-Palestine protesters that happened on Boxing Day last year, and you can see a bunch of people. It looks like they're in a mall. There's like a fountain in the front, and there's 2 levels, so there's people standing on the upper level, and from the upper level there's a big sign hanging down that says "Made in Canada" in red, and then under that in black, "Israeli killing machines." And there looks to be like bombs under that, and it says "Take action" with some kind of website. Can't see it because of the fountain. Photo courtesy of L3V1AT4AN, posted on X. That story was Kinsella. Organization is key to winning information wars. Just ask anti-Israel and MAGA crowds, by Warren Kinsella. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Jutta Leerdam's viral Olympic sports bra flash could earn Dutch speed skating star $1 million by Dan Balicki. Jutta Leerdam's gold medal might not even be close to her biggest haul during the 2026 Winter Olympic in Milano Cortina. The Dutch speed skating superstar could be raking in roughly $1 million for simply unzipping the front of her uniform post-race. According to one advertising expert, Nike, whose sports bra was on display as Leerdam celebrated her in the 1,000-meter speed skating event last week, could be forking over big bucks to the blonde beauty. After winning the event last Monday, breaking the Olympic record in the process, Leerdam unzipped her racing suit to show off the white Nike undergarment as she cooled down after the tough race. As the image of the emotional Leerdam went viral, Nike posted an image of her celebration on the company's official Instagram account, which boasts nearly 300 million followers. According to Frederike de Laat, founder of Brandleet, a marketing agency specializing in female athlete advertising, the 27-year-old Dutch woman could be heavily compensated through her brand deal. With Nike, I suspect you're looking at a figure of over $1 million, de Laat told Dutch news outlet AD per the Daily Mail. Meindert Schoot, editor-in-chief of the business magazine Quote, also said that Leerdam can earn around 1 cent per follower and sponsored Instagram post. With 6.2 million Instagram followers of her own, that means Leerdam could stand to earn roughly $100,000 per post featuring Nike. Dutch retailer also gets in on the hype. That's not the only ad deal that could be paying off for Leerdam after her big win either. In fact, it was her tears of joy that inspired an ad on Instagram from Dutch retailer Hema. Water resistant, even with tears of joy, the ad posted on Instagram read, quote, "We totally get it at Jutta Leerdam. We were also crying a tear on the couch. What a global achievement by the Dutch skating ladies," the caption said. Despite receiving some scathing criticism heading into the Olympics after opting to fly private to Milano Cortina, Leerdam has been one of the biggest stars of the Winter Games. What is her fiancé Jake Paul up to? With fiancé Jake Paul watching from the stands, Leerdam not only won gold in the 1,000-meter race, but also captured silver in 500 meters. Paul, the YouTube star turned boxer, was seen crying tears of joy himself after Leerdam won gold. Man, words can't even describe it. It's the greatest feeling of anything I've ever witnessed, to be honest, he said after the event. Just the amount of hard work that goes into it. Like 99.9% of people will never understand. And she pulled it off under the most amount of pressure ever. There is an incredible picture of Jutta Leerdam, and she's reacting after winning the gold in speed skating, and she's wearing an orange jumpsuit that has a red band around her right arm and these fingerless dark blue gloves. She is seen with one hand up high in the air, and the other hand is holding her sunglasses. Her hair is wild in the wind behind her, and you can see she's already unzipped her jumpsuit, and she's wearing the white bra that has a band at the bottom where you can see the word Nike and its logo, which is kind of like a check mark. Photo courtesy of Getty Images. That story was Jutta Leerdam's viral Olympic sports bra flash could earn Dutch speed skating star $1 million by Dan Balicki. The next story is Jarvis. Toronto taxpayers footing the bill for World Cup condoms by Noah Jarvis. Hosting 6 World Cup soccer games in Toronto is already $350 million over budget. Given those kinds of overruns, City Hall should look for savings. Instead, municipal bureaucrats blew big money on soccer-themed sex supplies. Toronto public health bureaucrats ordered over 600,000 condoms and 200,000 packets of sexual lubricant. All told, the sex supplies cost taxpayers $200,000. Those are the kinds of bills you'd expect to see from Hugh Hefner, not City Hall. When it was first pitched, City Hall officials were touting a $30 to $45 million price tag to bring a handful of World Cup games to Toronto. All said, 6 of the tournament's 104 matches will be held at BMO Field. Now, those 6 soccer games are set to cost taxpayers $380 million, 750% higher than City Hall first promised. When a project is 750% over budget, you need to start saying no. Instead of looking for savings, Toronto bureaucrats are blowing even more money on soccer-themed sex aids. Taxpayers forced to accommodate, quote, VIPs. When Toronto bureaucrats can't even say no to the branded condoms, just think about how they're spending money on the rest of the tournament. Taxpayers are being forced to go out of their way to accommodate anyone FIFA deems a VIP or VVIP under the World Cup contracts. FIFA is insisting government bend the country's immigration, customs, and security procedures for their special guests. You're paying for VIPs and VVIPs to have their own gate pickup area, special waiting rooms, special luggage collection, and VIP parking at the airport. They're even entitled to road closures and police motorcades on the taxpayer's dime. Toronto traffic is already a lot of fun. It'll be extra fun when roads are closed for FIFA limos. Those same soccer executives are billing taxpayers $25,000 for events hosting dignitaries, consulate officials, etc. during the World Cup. At the games, FIFA-nominated VIPs will bill taxpayers for access to their own lounge, while VVIPs thumb their noses at the low-end elites from their very, very important lounge. All that luxury is being paid for with tax dollars. Every dime that goes to VVIP lounges, expensive events for FIFA bigwigs, is money that isn't going toward core services or keeping taxes low. Ontarians oppose paying for World Cup. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow decided to raise the Municipal Accommodation Tax, or MAT, by 41.7% last summer. That's on top of big property tax hikes. The MAT is a hotel and short-term rental tax that President and CEO of the Greater Toronto Hotel Association, Sarah Angel, says is an additional burden on hotel owners. The more we increase our taxes, the less competitive we're going to be against other cities, Angel said. Chow has been sharply increasing taxes over the past 3 years, with her first 3 budgets increasing property taxes by 18.6%. So the next time you pay your property taxes, remember that some of your money is paying for a mountain of condoms and lube for 6 soccer games that are costing taxpayers $63.3 million apiece. Bureaucrats aren't even just billing Toronto households for the World Cup. They're making taxpayers from coast to coast pony up too. Toronto residents are putting up $178.7 million for the World Cup, while the Ontario and federal governments have already shelled out $97 million and $104.3 million respectively. That doesn't even consider the federal government's multi-million-dollar contribution for the 7 World Cup games being played in Vancouver, which was handed a similarly bad deal as Toronto. It's no wonder why 56% of Ontarians are opposed to paying for the World Cup, according to recent polling. When the lines at food banks are far too long, taxpayers can't afford projects that are hundreds of times over budget. Bureaucrats at City Hall need to learn how to say no and stop wasting so much taxpayer money on 6 international soccer games. There is a picture of the Toronto City Hall that was taken July 15th of last year, and you can see that there is a very big square-shaped pool with a fountain. There are people sitting around it on benches. There's this gray arch structure that goes over the pool, and then in the foreground there's this really tall standing sign that has a digital readout at the top. I believe it represents how many days are left till the World Cup and the hours and minutes. So at this time it's 331 days, 13 hours, 8 minutes, and 21 seconds. And under that it says FIFA Toronto, and it's on a black stand that says FIFA World Cup 26. There is no photo credit given. That story was Jarvis, Toronto Taxpayers Footing the Bill for World Cup Condoms, by Noah Jarvis. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 17th issue of the Toronto Sun. Your reader has been Melanie Gorelnik. Thank you for listening.